Every year, on the Tuesday before Lent, British kitchens came alive with something that had nothing to do with the thin lemon and sugar pancakes we make today. Your grandmother knew 25 different ways to celebrate Shrove Tuesday, and she used every last one of them. The tradition stretches back to medieval parish halls, where entire communities gathered to use up every last scrap of butter, eggs, and fat before 40 days of fasting began. But here is what nobody tells you. The pancake tossing, the race down the high street, the lemon squeezed over a thin crepe, is barely a fraction of what Shrove Tuesday once meant in a British kitchen. Number 14 on this list was handed out to farmhands as part of their wages on Pancake Day. Number 7 was so rich that several church congregations tried to ban it from the table. And number 1, the recipe that crowned every Shrove Tuesday from Cornwall to Aberdeen, has vanished so completely that most people under 50 have never even heard its name. These are the 25 forgotten British Pancake Day recipes our grandparents made every Shrove Tuesday. Before anyone in Britain fried a pancake in butter, they used dripping. Every kitchen had the ceramic pot sitting on the range, filled with strained beef or pork fat saved from the Sunday joint. On Shrove Tuesday, that jar came down from the shelf and went straight to the hottest burner. Your grandmother melted a teaspoon of dripping in the iron skillet until it shimmered faintly, then poured in her batter. The fat gave the underside a crispness that butter simply cannot replicate. A golden lacy edge with a depth of flavor that tasted of Sunday roasts and hearty suppers. Instead of caster sugar, she shook demerara over the top, its molasses note cutting through the richness of the dripping. A jar of dripping cost nothing. You had made it yourself. This was Shrove Tuesday as it was meant to be. Thrifty, rich, and entirely satisfying. Number 24. Frumenty. Long before pancakes became the centerpiece of Shrove Tuesday, there was frumenty, and it is the oldest Pancake Day tradition most people have never heard of. Housewives soaked whole cracked wheat overnight, then simmered it in fresh milk until the grains swelled fat and the mixture thickened to a porridge. Sugar, nutmeg, and a handful of plump currants went in near the end, and if the family were lucky, a spoonful of honey was stirred through. By the early 1900s, frumenty was already fading from Shrove Tuesday tables. But in rural households across Yorkshire, Shropshire, and the West Country, the wheat pot still appeared on the hob every Pancake Day morning as the first course before the batter was mixed. Women's Institute records from the 1940s still listed frumenty as a regional Shrove tradition. A pound of cracked wheat cost only pennies and served the whole family. Children who tasted it found it sweet, warming, and utterly unlike anything they ate the rest of the year. Apple fritters were once as essential to Pancake Day as pancakes themselves. Your grandmother would core and slice sharp bramleys into rings half an inch thick, dip them in a simple batter, and lower them into hot lard until they turned golden and puffed. The apple inside softened to a tart, jammy center, while the batter blistered and crisped with the heat. Dusted in caster sugar the moment they came out of the fat, they hissed and sizzled on the plate. Some households served fritters alongside pancakes. Others made them the main event, especially in apple-growing regions of Kent and Worcestershire, where bramleys were plentiful in winter storage. A dozen apples cost perhaps sixpence from the market stall. The Women's Institute cookery books from the 1950s listed apple fritters as the traditional Shrove-tide accompaniment, noting that the practice of frying apples in batter before Lent was already centuries old when Victorian housewives first wrote it down. In the Midlands, Yorkshire, and Lancashire, Pancake Day was Pikelet Day. A pikelet sat somewhere between a crumpet and a pancake, thinner than a crumpet, thicker than a crepe, and full of small holes that formed across the surface as the batter cooked. Your grandmother made her batter the night before with flour, a pinch of bicarbonate of soda, warm milk, and a small piece of fresh yeast. By Pancake Day morning, it had fermented gently overnight, developing a faint sourness that made the finished pikelet taste complex and alive. Cooked on the bare griddle without a ring to contain it, each pikelet spread unevenly with that characteristic porous surface. Hot from the griddle and spread with salted butter that melted immediately into every hole, pikelets on Shrove Tuesday were the food people waited for all year. In Wolverhampton, Birmingham, and Sheffield, street bakers sold them from trays on Pancake Day morning, and the queues stretched from the stall to the end of the street. Number 21. Staffordshire oatcakes. While the rest of England fried thin batter pancakes, Staffordshire did something entirely different on Shrove Tuesday. Housewives made oatcakes, not the hard, biscuit-like Scottish variety, but large, soft, pliable rounds made from a fermented batter of fine oatmeal, plain flour, and yeast that had proved slowly overnight. Cooked on a dry griddle until pale and speckled, they came off the heat floppy and fragrant with a faint fermented oat smell that anyone who grew up in the potteries could identify blindfolded. On Shrove Tuesday, they were eaten both ways. Sweet, with golden syrup and butter. Savoury, stuffed with bacon and cheese, the oatcake wrapping around the filling like a soft, earthy blanket. Staffordshire oatcake shops, those small terraced front rooms where families sold oatcakes from a hatch in the window, were once a feature of every street in Hanley and Burslem. On Pancake Day, the queues stretched around the corner. Number 20. Singing hinnies. In Northumberland and County Durham, Shrove Tuesday belonged to singing hinnies, the griddle cakes that hissed and sang as they cooked, announcing themselves to every hungry person in the terrace. Your grandmother rubbed cold lard into flour until the mixture resembled fine breadcrumbs, added currants and a pinch of mixed spice, then brought it together with milk into a soft dough. Placed on the hot griddle, the lard inside melted and spat, creating that sizzling sound that gave the cake its name. Pitmen called them hinnies, the Geordie term of endearment for anything beloved, because these cakes genuinely were. Rich and short with a crumbling, buttery texture, sweet with currants and warm with spice. Singing hinnies were the Shrove Tuesday treat that miners carried wrapped in cloth to the afternoon shift. By the 1960s, the tradition was already fading from urban Tyneside as shop-bought biscuits replaced the griddle. Number 19. Drop scones with black treacle. Scots called Shrove Tuesday Fastens E'en, and in Scottish kitchens the Pancake Day tradition centred on drop scones, thick, pillowy rounds dropped from a spoon onto a hot girdle. Your grandmother made hers with black treacle instead of sugar, stirring a tablespoon into the batter until it turned the colour of dark mahogany. The treacle gave each scone an intense, almost smoky sweetness, and a stickiness that meant they had to be eaten immediately, hot from the girdle, with a scraping of cold butter melting into the warmth. Children pressed close, watching for the moment the bubbles appeared across the surface, the signal to flip. In Aberdeenshire, the tradition of treacle scones on Fastens E'en was so established that school cookery lessons held special Shrove Tuesday classes teaching the method. A tin of black treacle cost about threepence and lasted the family months. Pattern break. Number 18. Buckwheat pancakes. Here is where the history of Pancake Day gets genuinely surprising. Before wheat flour became cheap and widely available, buckwheat was the pancake grain, and buckwheat pancakes were made in kitchens across northern England, Wales, and Scotland every Shrove Tuesday for centuries. Buckwheat is not wheat at all, but a seed related to sorrel, and it makes a batter that turns deep brown and earthy when cooked, with a nutty, complex flavor that plain white flour cannot match. Your great-grandmother's buckwheat pancakes would have been made with a fermented overnight batter, giving them a slight sourness that cut beautifully through rich fillings. The decline of buckwheat pancakes in Britain was not an accident. When industrialized milling began selling cheap, refined white flour in paper bags in the late Victorian era, millers actively marketed it as modern and superior, pushing buckwheat to the margins. By the 1930s, buckwheat had essentially vanished from British kitchens. Here is the twist that should make you pause. Today, premium health food shops sell buckwheat flour for nearly £5 a bag, marketed as artisan and nutritionally superior. Your grandmother used it because it was the cheap grain, the grain of ordinary Shrove Tuesday. The industry that erased buckwheat from Pancake Day is now selling it back to us at a profit, calling it a discovery. Number 17. Currant fritters. On Shrove Tuesday in Devon, Cornwall, and across the West Country, currant fritters joined pancakes on the table as a matter of tradition. Your grandmother used the same simple batter she made for pancakes, but stirred in a handful of plump dried currants before dropping spoonfuls into hot fat. Each fritter puffed as it cooked, the currants swelling and releasing their sweetness into the batter. They came out round and golden, some currants bursting through the crust and caramelizing dark and sticky at the edges. Shaken in a paper bag with caster sugar while still hot, they rattled and steamed together, the sugar melting against the surface. A pound of currants cost about sixpence in the 1950s. The Women's Institute archives from Somerset specifically list currant fritters as the essential companion to lemon pancakes on Shrove Tuesday, a pairing so natural it required no explanation. Number 16. Welsh griddle pancakes. In Wales, Shrove Tuesday was dyd mor thinid, and the tradition was not the thin English crepe, but a thick, yeast-raised pancake cooked on the Welsh bake stone that sat permanently over the kitchen fire. Your grandmother mixed her batter with fresh yeast in the morning, letting it rise gently in the warm kitchen until full of bubbles, then spooned it onto the dry bake stone, where it cooked slowly before being flipped. Welsh griddle pancakes were sturdier and more filling than their English cousins, with a chewy, bread-like texture from the yeast and a faint, fermented tang. Served with salted butter and a pool of golden syrup, they were substantial enough to constitute a full meal after a day's farm work. In the slate quarrying communities of Gwynedd, the bakestone pancake was what men carried to the shift wrapped in cloth on Pancake Day. The bakestone never left the fire. Number 15. Fat rascals. In Yorkshire, Shrove Tuesday was Fat Rascals Day. These thick, irregular fruitcakes baked on the griddle were the northern answer to the southern pancake. Your grandmother cut cold lard and butter into flour, added sugar, mixed spice and currants, then bound the mixture into a rough dough that she dropped in uneven rounds onto the hot griddle. They spread irregularly, some thicker on one side than the other, in that way that spoke of hands working quickly in a warm kitchen. They baked golden and crisp at the edges, with a dense, spiced center studded with fruit. Tea shops in Harrogate and Whitby still sell fat rascals today, but the connection to Shrove Tuesday has been entirely forgotten. Betty's tea rooms made them famous in the 20th century, but it was the farmhouse kitchens of the Dales that made them first, every Pancake Day, because the fat and flour of winter stores needed using before Lent stripped the larder bare. Number 14. Soda farls. In Northern Ireland and the border counties, Shrove Tuesday belonged to soda farls, a tradition so universal that the day was called Farl Tuesday in some communities. Your grandmother mixed bicarbonate of soda into plain flour, added buttermilk until a soft dough came together. She shaped it into a round, cut it into 4 quarters called farls, and cooked them on a dry griddle until they rose gently and the surface looked pale and floury. On Shrove Tuesday, the whole family gathered to eat them hot from the griddle. They were split open and spread with butter that ran into the warm, white crumb, or enjoyed with a drizzle of honey and the last of the winter's bramble jelly. The buttermilk gave each farl a faint, pleasing sourness that balanced the sweetness of whatever was spread on top. A pint of buttermilk cost a penny from the dairy. The tradition stretched back through generations of farmhouse kitchens where nothing was wasted. Pattern break. Number 13. Pancake Day, pea soup. Here is the one that stops people in their tracks. Before the pancakes came the soup. In kitchens across the Midlands, the North, and Scotland, Shrove Tuesday did not begin with a pan of batter, but with a pot of pea soup, thick, green, and simmered with a ham bone or a piece of salted bacon. The logic was entirely practical. Peas, like fat, eggs, and flour, were foods that needed using before the Lenten fast began. Your grandmother soaked split peas on pancake Monday evening, then set the pot on the range first thing Shrove Tuesday morning, letting it bubble slowly while the Pancake Day preparations were made. Pea soup was the savoury first course at midday. Pancakes were the sweet finale in the afternoon and evening. In mining families across County Durham, oral histories specifically record this two-course Shrove Tuesday tradition. The soup gave the meal structure and substance, a complete pancake day rather than just a sugar rush. When convenience culture reduced Shrove Tuesday to a single evening of tossing, the soup disappeared first. Nobody told us we were only celebrating half the day. Number 12. Pancake pudding. When Shrove Tuesday produced more batter and pancakes than the family could eat in one sitting, nothing went to waste. Leftover pancakes went straight into the pudding dish for pancake pudding, a baked Shrove Tuesday dessert that has almost completely vanished from modern kitchens. Your grandmother layered cold pancakes in a greased dish, spreading each one with jam, whether bramble, plum, or sharp marmalade, then poured a rich egg custard over the whole thing and baked it slowly until the custard set firm and the top turned golden. The jam between the layers bubbled and softened as it baked, bleeding color into the custard and creating pools of sweetness that made every forkful different. A Women's Institute cookery booklet from 1947 published a pancake pudding recipe specifically for Shrove Tuesday leftovers, noting the dish had been made in English farmhouses on the Wednesday after Pancake Day for generations. It stretched one celebration across 2 meals. Not every Pancake Day pancake was sweet. In households where the housekeeping budget was tight, Shrove Tuesday was also the day to use up whatever cold cooked mince or stew remained from earlier in the week. Your grandmother made plain crepes. She filled each one with warmed minced beef bound in thick onion gravy, rolled them tight, placed them in a row in a greased baking dish, and put a handful of grated cheese on top. 20 minutes in the oven, and she had a main course for 6 people that cost almost nothing. The filling absorbed the gravy as it baked, the cheese melted and browned, and the pancake underneath turned soft and yielding where it soaked the sauce. Women's Institute records from Lancashire list Savory pancake rolls filled with minced beef and onion as a standard Shrove. Tuesday first course well into the 1960s. They were served before the sweet pancakes that came out when the tea was made. Number 10. Elderflower pancakes. In the rural counties of England where elder trees grew in every hedgerow, an early spring sometimes brought elderflower forward to February. When it did, cottage kitchens made elderflower pancakes, dipping whole flat heads of fresh blossom into a light batter and frying them quickly in hot fat until the flowers turned golden and translucent. The batter clung to every tiny floret, and each fritter was perfumed with that musky floral scent, crisp at the edges and extraordinary on the tongue. Shaken in sugar while still hot, the fragrance intensified, and the kitchen smelled like summer. On years when elderflower was not yet out, Some housewives crumbled dried flowers stored from the previous summer into the batter. Country diaries from the 1890s and the early 1900s record elderflower pancake day recipes in Kent, Worcestershire, and the Cotswolds. The practice continued in rural households well into the 1940s before it was lost entirely to the simplification of Shrove Tuesday. Number 9. Flannel cakes. The Welsh called them flannel cakes, and they were nothing like any pancake made south of the border. A batter of finely ground oatmeal and plain flour, mixed with fresh buttermilk and a little bicarbonate of soda, was left to stand for an hour until the oatmeal softened and the mixture thickened into something almost grainy in texture. Cooked on the dry bake stone in small rounds, they took longer than wheat flour pancakes to cook through, and came off the stone slightly chewy, matty in color rather than glossy, with a nutty, earthy flavor that paired beautifully with salted butter and dark treacle. In the valleys of South Wales, flannel cakes were the Shrove Tuesday food of working families who could not afford a pound of white flour but always had oatmeal in the crock. By the 1950s, even in Wales, the tradition had largely given way to standard white flour pancakes. Today, flannel cakes appear occasionally in Welsh cookery revival books, but the Pancake Day connection has been almost entirely forgotten. Pattern break. Number 8. Pancakes with treacle and clotted cream. Here is something the lemon and sugar lobby does not want you to know. The original British pancake topping was not lemon juice and caster sugar, it was treacle. Before citrus became cheap and widely available in Britain, before Jaffa oranges arrived in paper-wrapped boxes at every grocer, Shrove Tuesday pancakes were drizzled with black treacle or golden syrup and eaten with a spoonful of clotted cream if you were lucky enough to live in Devon or Cornwall. Golden syrup, first sold by Lyle's in 1885, became the Pancake Day staple for a generation of British families for whom lemon was either too expensive or too sharp. The combination of treacle and clotted cream on a hot pancake is extraordinary. The treacle soaks into the warm batter while the cream melts and pools around it, and every mouthful is rich, sticky, and deeply satisfying in a way that acidic lemon simply is not. Devon Women's Institute recipe books from the 1920s and the 1930s list treacle and clotted cream as the standard pancake accompaniment. The lemon and sugar combination that Britain now treats as ancient tradition was, in many regions, the cheaper modern substitute that replaced something genuinely magnificent. When Shrove Tuesday fell during a run of good fortune, when the hens were laying well and the cream was plentiful, some households built a stacked pancake gâteau, a tower of thin crepes layered with jam and whipped cream that sat at the center of the table like a proper birthday cake. Your grandmother would make 12 or 15 thin pancakes, let them cool flat on a rack, then begin building, spreading each layer with homemade raspberry or damson jam and a thin coat of whipped cream. The finished tower was pressed gently and set somewhere cool for an hour to firm up before being sliced at the table like a proper gâteau, each wedge revealing the striped layers of pale pancake, dark jam, and cream. In France, it was called gâteau de crêpes. In Britain, families simply called it the pancake cake. The Women's Institute competition records from the 1930s list stacked pancake gâteau as a regular Shrove Tuesday entry. When it disappeared, we had no name left to search for it under. Number 6. Simnel spiced pancakes. In the weeks around Lent, British kitchens operated under the influence of Simnel spices, the blend of cinnamon, nutmeg, mace, and dried fruit that flavored both the Mothering Sunday cake and, in some households, the Shrove Tuesday pancake batter. Your grandmother stirred ground nutmeg, a pinch of cinnamon, and a handful of soaked dried currants directly into her batter before cooking. In some northern counties, a little ground mace or allspice was added as well, creating a batter that smelled of Christmas pudding but cooked like a pancake. The spiced currant pancakes were darker, more complex, and entirely different in character to the plain white flour crepe we know today. They were aromatic rather than bland, and they held the spice smell long after they cooled, filling the house with warmth well into the evening. Shrove Tuesday and Mothering Sunday fell in the same season, and in households where the same spice blend appeared in both, the two celebrations were connected by smell as much as by tradition. Number 5. Scotch pancakes with golden syrup. Scotland took its Pancake Day seriously, and Scotch pancakes, those small, thick, pillowy rounds, were the centerpiece of Fastens E'en from Edinburgh to the Outer Hebrides. Your grandmother beat her batter to a smooth, thick consistency with egg, flour, buttermilk, and a spoonful of caster sugar, then dropped spoonfuls onto the greased girdle. They cooked fast, bubbling within a minute before flipping to reveal a deep, golden underside. Stacked in a warmed cloth to stay soft and tender, they went to the table in towers of 8 or 10, accompanied by the golden syrup tin, a pat of cold butter, and sometimes a small bowl of crowdy, the traditional Scottish fresh cheese that cut through the sweetness beautifully. On Fastens E'en, Scotch pancakes appeared on tables that would not produce such generosity again for 40 days. That knowledge, that tomorrow would bring the restraint of Lent, made every mouthful a little more deliberate and a little more grateful. January and February are the only weeks in the year when Seville oranges arrive in British shops, their short, bitter season timed by accident or fate to coincide almost exactly with Shrove Tuesday. Your grandmother knew this. The marmalade she made in January, boiling the bitter Sevillian peel with sugar until the jars were lined up gleaming on the windowsill, was ready just in time for Pancake Day. Spread on a hot pancake, Seville marmalade behaved differently from lemon and sugar. The peel softened further with the heat of the batter, and the bitterness of the orange counterbalanced the fat in a way that was more complex and more satisfying than fresh lemon juice. Some housewives added a knob of butter under the marmalade, letting it melt and combine as they rolled the pancake. The connection between Seville marmalade season and Shrove Tuesday was once so understood that cookery writers in the 1920s mentioned it as obvious fact, requiring no explanation at all. Number 3. Condensed milk pancakes. When fresh cream was too expensive and evaporated milk was already spoken for, thrifty Shrove Tuesday cooks turned to condensed milk, and the results were extraordinary. Your grandmother drizzled a teaspoon of sweetened condensed milk directly onto a hot pancake as it cooked, letting the thick, sweet liquid warm and spread across the surface before folding the pancake in half. The condensed milk caramelized slightly against the hot iron, developing toffee notes that neither sugar nor golden syrup could produce. A tin of Nestle condensed milk cost about 9p in the 1950s, and served the whole family through an entire Pancake Day. Children discovered quickly that condensed milk pancakes were superior to the traditional lemon version, though mothers kept a careful eye on portions, the sweetness being intense enough to silence even the hungriest appetite after 2 or 3. Condensed milk pancakes appeared in school cookery lesson notebooks from the 1940s and the 1950s, jotted in the margins as an alternative to lemon and sugar. They were a wartime adaptation that turned out to be better than what they replaced. Number 2. Banana fritters. Bananas were exotic in post-war Britain, rationed until 1954, and genuinely thrilling to children who had grown up without them. When rationing ended and bananas finally returned to the greengrocer, British kitchens found a new Shrove Tuesday tradition almost immediately. Banana fritters, battered and fried in hot lard until the outside turned gold and blistered, while the banana inside softened to warm, intensely sweet mush, became the most anticipated part of Pancake Day in households across Britain in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Your grandmother peeled ripe bananas, cut them in half lengthways, dipped each piece in a thin, crisp batter, and lowered them into fat where they spat and sizzled furiously. Served immediately and dusted in sugar, they were eaten standing at the kitchen counter because nobody could wait for them to reach the table. The transition from wartime frugality to post-war abundance was tasted most directly in this moment, a piece of tropical fruit battered and fried on Shrove Tuesday in a British terrace kitchen on a February evening. Number 1. The yeast-raised parish pancake. And finally, in first place, the recipe that once crowned every Shrove Tuesday in Britain and has vanished so completely that most people under 50 have never encountered it. Before chemical leavening, before baking powder and bicarbonate of soda sat in every pantry, the original British Shrove Tuesday pancake was raised with yeast, and the result was something categorically different from the thin crepe we know today. Your grandmother's grandmother would dissolve a small piece of fresh yeast in warm milk the evening before Shrove Tuesday, mix it into flour with eggs and a little salt, then cover the bowl and leave it to ferment overnight. By Pancake Day morning, the batter had risen and expanded, full of bubbles and faintly sour from the overnight fermentation. Poured into a hot, well-greased pan, the yeast-raised pancake cooked thick and airy, full of irregular holes left by the bursting gas bubbles, crisp underneath and soft on top, with a complex bread-like flavor that a simple batter alone could never achieve. Medieval parish accounts from English churches record the distribution of yeast-raised Shrove Tuesday pancakes to the poor of the congregation, with ingredients donated by wealthy parishioners as a formal act of charity before Lent. The tradition of making yeast batter the night before was so universal that Shrovetide was sometimes referred to as beginning on Shrove Monday, because the preparation started the evening before. Women's Institute notebooks from Wiltshire, Somerset, and Derbyshire still contained handwritten yeast pancake recipes as late as the 1930s, always noted as the old way, as opposed to the quick, modern batter. When dried yeast became widely available in the 1950s and instant baking powder made overnight proving seem unnecessary, the yeast-raised pancake vanished from British kitchens within a single generation. Nobody called it a loss at the time. It was just progress, a shortcut that seemed to save an evening's effort. But the pancake that resulted was thinner, plainer, and entirely without the warmth that a night of slow fermentation had built into every bite. That is the Shrove Tuesday recipe that was quietly surrendered. The most ancient, the most forgotten, the best one. These 25 recipes are not just history. They are the record of what Shrove Tuesday once meant in a British kitchen, not a single hectic evening of tossing and squeezing lemon, but a full day of tradition, from the pea soup at midday to the yeast-raised pancakes at nightfall, from the singing hinnies on the Northumberland griddle to the stacked gâteau on the parlour table. Every recipe on this list was made by real hands in real kitchens, and passed between generations until the moment it was not. Try one this Shrove Tuesday. Write it down. Tell us in the comments which recipe surprised you most.